This is Frank Islam, Chairman and CEO of FI Investment Group, and your host of Washington Calling, where we interview leading voices from business and politics that impact you, the viewer. Today, our guest is Arun Kumar. Arun Kumar is a veteran Indian journalist who works for IANS, New Delhi base, which is the largest wire service in India. Arun is a dear friend. I admire his vision, his values, and the most important thing is that I had an opportunity to interact with him while he was in Washington D.C. and I immensely enjoyed our conversations, our interactions. So thank you, Arun, for coming to the show.
Thanks, Frank. It's good to be back with you, and thanks for having me on your show.
So let me ask you, what's the difference in journalism between U.S. and India? As you know, the journalists in the U.S. is still held in high regard. Do you think journalists in India face bullying? And do you think they are also regarded in high regard in India?
Well, there is a lot of difference between journalism in India and journalism in the U.S. For one, what I'm saying is um, uh, the the kind of newspapers we have. We have about 70,000 newspapers in India, about 1,000 channels, and then we have 1,652 languages, and 22 of them official languages. So to cater to this kind of an audience, the journalist has to, vary his style and all that. Of course, journalists are regarded uh, very highly by the media. The basic difference between Indian and U.S. journalists is, especially after the election of President Trump, is that there seems to be, in the U.S. a kind of mixing facts with opinion and sort of, whereas, and also when they write some in a sort of feature-ish manner, which is good. But on the other hand, this mixing of the facts and opinion is not really good. And on the other hand, the Indian media generally they follow what we call the traditional inverted pyramid style, where the news is at the top, and then you explain what it means.
How have the recent events and trends in the US influenced the Indian media? As you know, as you just said, this administration is threat in the United States freedom of press. And and it has been declining in the United States. Trump tweets to circumvent the free press. So tell me a little bit about in India what's going on.
Well, like you pointed out, I mean, since the election of Trump, in fact, even before that, the U.S. media has been obsessed with Trump. In fact, a New York columnist admitted that they are addicted to Trump, and the reason is what they call the Trump bump, because they are getting more subscribers, they are getting more eyeballs, and especially the cable channels, they are totally devoted. All the time they are talking about what Trump is doing, what he's not doing, and in the process, what is happening is that the uh, uh, major issues, the important issues of the day, sometimes they tend to get ignored. For instance, what is happening in the case of immigration or like all that, even the major events like uh, the economy and all that, they are not
You're
so adequately reported as they should be. Um, Luckily, for as of now, the Indian media, as far as the reporting is concerned, they still follow, as I said, kind of objective style. Although I would say the TV channels they have quickly learned the tricks of the trade from the US, and there are channels where in the name of debate we have what you would call cacophony, and in fact one news channel I recently saw, it says they dish out news nimbu nichorde, which means with a squeeze of lemon.
yes, that's
So
interesting.
I mean, this is the kind of trend I'm worried about.
So is the fake news has impacted the Indian media And how's the social media promoting the fake news in India? As you know, the fake news travels a lot faster than the truth to the people, correct? And also, how do you go about correcting the influx of the fake news?
Luckily, I would say that fake news has not infiltrated the Indian media so much. Like as I said, unlike the US media, we are not obsessed with Trump, although everything Trump sells in India too. But we are not obsessed with that. And as far as the Indian events are concerned, we are reporting fairly objectively. At the same time, as a recent study mentioned, that the this fake news has been used as a pretext to bring in restrictions in many parts of the world. And in India, too, last month, the Information and Broadcasting Ministry issued guidelines for the accreditation of journalists, saying that those who are accused of dishing out fake news should not be given the government accreditation. But luckily, wiser counsel prevailed, and the Prime Minister's office intervened, and the very next day, these guidelines were withdrawn.
You're right. So the fake news, as I said, travels faster, and the Trump is the powerful purveyor of the fake news. And, and the overriding motivation of the media and journalists like you is to separate the fact from fiction. And
Right.
anything that does not favor Trump, he considered that as a fake news.
Yeah, but that's a problem that the U.S. media would be facing, but not so much at this side of the world.
So my question, Arun, is what would be the long-term impact of these changes on the media in India and the US? And I want you to shine a bright light on the truthful news, which in fact is based on authentic, accurate, and provides information fairly and fully.
I'm really concerned about that. If this becomes a kind of a long-term thing, then we would be losing track of the main issues, and then we'll be just because dishing out juicy trivia and like as I just mentioned in the case of the US, most of the time what he tweets or what he doesn't tweet,
It
and
is it is unfortunate that we are not talking about the substance, which is
yeah,
important for America and for the world in terms of us providing the global leadership that we need desperately in our
right,
country.
right, right,
Uh, I want to talk a little about the freedom of press in India. As you know, the freedom of press is a pillar of a democracy, and the freedom
right.
of press is vital for a vibrant democracy. India remains a vibrant democracy because of freedom, because the resilience of the questioning press. So, what do you believe the journalists play in advancing the cause of the free society?
Well, like as I said, the Indian press is fairly free, although the what is called the Reporters Without Borders recently downgraded India's rank from
Yes. So
136 to
they
138,
also
and they
downgraded
are
us as well.
yeah, squeezed us between Myanmar and Pakistan, which I think is really totally far-fetched, and the Press Council of India really joined issue with them, saying that this is not based on objective criteria, and essentially this is based on perceptions and opinions, and uh, so that's a bit unfortunate. Uh, there are other, I mean, I'm not saying that there are not pressures from the powers that be uh, that would be uh, elsewhere too. But I think by and large, the Indian media is very free.
And they continue to tell the truth, correct?
Yes, they continue to tell the truth. And like as I said, except for 18 months of dark days of emergency imposed by Mrs. Gandhi in 1975, we
Yeah.
had this. Then there are other issues also, like for instance, unlike the US, in India, the what is called the central or the federal government and the state governments, they are one of the largest advertisers. So sometimes that influences because, especially the small newspapers, for them, uh, when they are looking for an advertisement, they may not, as they say, call a spade a spade. So that's an issue. And also, they also get some perks like subsidized accommodation. So that may also sometimes influence the writings. I'm talking here about not the top journalists, but I'm talking about, say, in the smaller towns, or whatever it is. So they face this kind of oppression.
So do they face censorship from the government and others? There have been several incidents that have been very violent, and there have been killing of the journalists as well. And do the journalists have the responsibility to tell the truth?
Yeah, journalists certainly have a responsibility to tell the truth, and like as I said, there is no official censorship. But then I just mentioned about the kind of pressures they face from the powers that be. Uh, like one prominent editor, he had he resigned from his newspaper because his paper was forced to kind of publish an apology to a politician about whom they had done a series of stories about his involvement in the drug trade. Also, then there are other pressures like from the extremist elements and what is called antisocial elements. Um, Recently, or like last year, one prominent journalist was shot down outside her home in Bangalore by people who were alleged to be the Hindu extremists. And recently, a Bombay court has sentenced Chota Rajan to life imprisonment for ordering the hit of a crime journalist. And you know what? What was his crime? This journalist, he had described Chota Rajan as a petty gangster compared to Dawood Ibrahim. So he ordered that he should be killed, and he was killed.
But the
So this is the
censorship,
kind of pressure.
you're absolutely right, but the censorship is not healthy for the Indian democracy.
Right. So there's
Do you,
no censorship as such, but then there are pressures, like as I said, indirect pressures, and not maybe not so much from the government, but then these antisocial elements. It's for the government to control these antisocial social elements.
yeah. So do you think the journalists have the powerful platform to stand on and to take a issue and saying that this is the wrong thing to do? What the other
Yeah,
people are
absolutely.
doing?
I mean, we have. There are what is called. There's the Press Council of India, which takes if the journalists do something wrong, that it's taken. They are taken to task, and they can. And there are other forums, Editors Guild, where the editors express their views about these issues. And so, yes,
Do you believe that journalists in India promote the transparency and accountability?
yes, they do. I think so.
Can you shed some light on it, some of the examples in terms of the transparency and accountability? If the people have committed violence, do they go about telling them that you cannot give your own opinion, but you can basically tell the facts?
Like I mentioned, uh, journalists in India, they do promote transparency and accountability. And like I mentioned the last time when this journalist, Gauri Lankesh, was killed outside her home in Bangalore, there was an
Right.
uproar and there were lots, editorials were written. And similarly, like as I said, only the last month, the the Information and Broadcasting Ministry had to withdraw its guidelines relating to so-called fake news, because there was an uproar among the in the press, and um, uh, opinion writers came about it and so on. And so very next day, within 24 hours, the Prime Minister's office had to intervene and have these guidelines withdrawn.
So you see the brighter horizon for the journalists to promote the freedom of press, freedom of expression, and to make sure they speak up and they speak out against the violence and against the threat to the journalist. And you said that very eloquently.
I do see, yeah, I do see a brighter horizon, but I would add this, that they have to be on their toes all the time. I mean, to all these attempts to sneak in some sort of um, way to control them and all that would always be there. The powers that be would always try to control you. And then all these antisocial elements or others, they would also, try to put their thumb on you. But so we have to be vigilant, and it's not that we can just hope that things would be fine.
Okay. So I want to talk a little bit about a topic which is important to both of us, and we have talked several times during our conversation while you were stationed in Washington, D.C. What do you think the India diaspora can help to achieve its fullest potential? Remember, the India diaspora, you believe, had the character, the capacity, and the competence to help India in several pivotal areas, economic, political, and social areas and developments, and they are uniquely positioned and they have the vital resources to help India.
Yeah,
Just
I
your thought.
agree. I mean, I agree completely with your views about them, and I, for one, would like a kind of a multi-pronged approach for like bilateral fora, like your U.S. India COS forum and all that. They can come forward and then um, make pleas for more investment friendly, business friendly environment. But more than that, I would like on on their own. Or at another level, I would like the people of Indian origin to intervene directly. Like I would give you your example, for instance. You set up this business school in Aligarh, which is very commendable. But I, for one, would consider your attempt to, I mean, your plans to, or I don't know whether it's already operational, open a girls' school in your hometown, Azamgarh. So,
Right.
so this is what we need. And again, since the Indian diaspora knows what works in India, so I would suggest associations like the global organization that is GOPIO, People of Indian Origin, and others, they could come forward and make a concerted effort to not only, uh, uh, on focused areas, like as I said, education for one, that you are doing, healthcare could be another, and then again, this pollution is another major area. New Delhi now is the most polluted city in the world. Bombay is number 4. Beijing
Oh
is
my.
number 5. So two of the 5 top most polluted or the with the worst air quality are um, what is called in India. Similarly, like there are other issues like as part of what the Prime Minister calls the Swachhata Abhiyan, we want to end open defecation in the rural areas. Or many of the people still go out and defecate in the open. Now,
So you,
so
you
this is the
talk
kind
about,
of
yeah, go ahead. Go ahead, Arun. Sorry.
so what I'm talking about is that instead of blindly aping in the West, for instance, I would tell you the place where I live. It is called Gurugram or Gurgaon, it's just a suburb
Right.
of Delhi. You have all these multi-story buildings with everything is all glass. Now, in a country like India, which has temperatures reaching up to 45, I think you are converting and then you are spending I don't know how much amount of money to air condition these hot houses.
Right.
So what we need to do is we need to work out what in India we call jugaad or make do things which work. Using the local resources, we should be able to build houses which stay cool on their own. Which don't need expensive air conditioning. Now, in this, like again going back to Gurugram, it's called the Millennial City. But
Okay.
for houses, there is no water, so tankers bring waters to these multi-story houses to bring water.
Wow.
So
Okay.
we have to
So
work.
so you said about the key priority areas the Indian diaspora can help, and I mentioned you say education, commerce, economy, creating jobs, and also creating companies, innovations, and entrepreneurship, and they have the capacity to bring broad economic benefits to India, and you mentioned that.
Yeah,
But some of the
yeah.
things you mentioned we did not. Skills development is very important also for the Indian diaspora to help. But something you
Yeah,
mentioned about the pollution and
yeah,
about the green energy and the
yeah.
those are the important aspect. Is I want you to shed some light on the philanthropy part of that, not the charity, which is the sustainable um, power of the purpose of philanthropy. And for example, the AIF is doing some work, Ekel Foundation, Pratham USA is doing that. Tell us a little bit about that, how they're having an impact on in India.
Like yeah, you mentioned about these foundations they are having, but Bill Gates Foundation for one is another one which is having like some of the areas which I mentioned. So they have taken these projects. For instance, they have set up two projects where the is called the fecal sludge is processed, and then it is the water, and this is separated. The water is used for agriculture, and then that's where the Indian diaspora comes, because they know what works back home, or in their motherland, and so they should be able to take the local resources and then accordingly make use of those to, like as I said, right, from clean air, clean water, affordable housing. Uh, like you mentioned, of course, this on another level we need jobs, we need commerce, and so on. But at the gut level, I mean, at the basic level, these are the things which are more important for a person, common person.
So, one more questions that I have as we close our conversation. Your thoughts on the future of U.S.-India relation, and you live in both countries, and as President
Yeah.
Obama said, defining partnership of the 21st century. Do you still think it's still being defined?
Yeah, it is. But like as I said, there is support from, I for one would say that Trump has kept his promised to be best friends with India. And like when Prime Minister Narendra Modi went to the US, in his usual style, he said relations between India has never been stronger or never been better. And it's not these words. If you really look at it, there have been, especially in the area of defense, there have been a lot of this thing. And again, in the case of terrorism, for instance, um, uh, India and the US now are together fighting from IS, Al Qaeda to ISIS to Pakistan-based Lashkar-e-Taiba and the D Company, and also Trump has been really tough on Pakistan in relating to terrorism. Uh, for once, a US administration has stopped military aid to Pakistan on this issue. So I, for one, see brighter horizons for. In
You also mentioned about the intelligence sharing
Yeah,
and the defense ties, which is very important, and the maritime, which is also an important aspect. Is that so? And is there any effect on the tariff that the Trump imposed on it on Indian goods to come to the United States? I don't think it had made
no,
any
I mean,
difference.
no, not really. I mean, there would be some concern now that Trump has, walked out of the Iran deal. There would be some concern. India would again have to do some balancing act because Iran continues to be a major supplier of oil to India, and
Right.
hopefully India would get some exemption or whatever. And also, not only oil. Besides that, we have long-standing cultural ties with Iran, and so India would have to do a balancing act to work out. I mean, not rub Trump on the wrong side.
What about the people-to-people relationship? They play a very important role. What they did with U.S.-India nuclear deal.
Certainly do play a role. And I, for one, see that, like as I said, there are about 200,000 Indian students next only to the China. Earlier, Indians were, at the top. And again, I was just looking at the recent figures, but people are, uh, most of the newspapers, they point out the H-1B issue as a major issue. And then they are talking about Trump administration trying to restrict the H-1B visas, and also restricting the visas for the spouses of the H-1 visa holders. But if you look at the statistics, even last year, 75% of the what is called H1B visas went to the
You are
Indians.
an Indian
And
citizen, right?
and 96% of the H4 visas for the spouses of the H1B went to the Indians. Only the next was 3% to the Chinese. So what do we want? Do we want 100%? I mean, so one has to be realistic and one has to take a look at the big picture. And as you rightly pointed out, we have so many people in high places uh, in the US administration and even outside the US administration, there are so many contacts between India and the US. Even if, for God forbid, there is a decline, there is someone in the White House who is not so much for better Indo-US relations. I doubt there would be a downturn.
Very good. Um, so, immigrants play a very important role. They infuse this nation with far horizons and new frontier, thereby keeping
Right.
the hope alive as well, as President Kennedy said. So, thank you very
Right.
much, Arun, for your comments, and I enjoyed our conversation. This is Frank Islam wishing you a great week, and thank you for watching.